people would use one character to accumulate some things, transfer resources to another, or create characters to harass other players, and we shut down on that. But try as we might, we can't pare down this list because people seem to come back from the grave. They'll be gone for a couple years and then re-engage just as vigorously as if they had never left. And those of us who are still there remember them and greet them warmly back into the fold. And it's astonishing how quickly they reintegrate and redevelop their prominence. We have representatives from all age groups. In my experience, most of the people were college students, started out young and reckless, and then they would talk their friends into playing, like, hey, why won't you do anything with me? Well, I got this thing going on, and they would build small pockets. But we do have some people who are even older than me, and they may be represented on some of those cave drawings that I mentioned earlier. And we have them up to in excess of 50 years old. And it's just fun to see how they interact with the younger, more aggressive players we usually get seasonally when the new university season starts, the school year. You'll get an influx of brash, arrogant, reckless sons of bitches. Cover her ears, please. That we have to keep in line by just social standards that people have. The player killing exists on our mud, and it's usually a form of discipline or quick retribution. Somebody betrayed you and you did something. We try to temper the escalation so it isn't big community wars, and it works out. And that the large part of our appeal comes from the interaction of players. I've been there for about 12 years now. And I've been not a good player, but I've been a great character, where I've made, my treasure has been accumulating relationships, building relationships with people all over the world, to the point that when I was getting married and we were planning a honeymoon, no matter where on the globe my wife suggested, I said, well, we could always just swing by and visit so-and-so from the mud, where she got utterly frustrated and left the planning to me. Yeah, and much of the content on Batmud is built to support collaboration. In some cases, it's the key to our survival. One of the things we'll expand on later is that this is a game where the people contribute by playing, and then later they can progress into contribute by coding or supporting the content in one way or another. Even as a player, one of the things I would do for some of the non-American wizards would be to correct their English. When they would make room descriptions, I would take the paragraph and rewrite it for them so that it would flow into something sensible. And there's that kind of collaboration all throughout the mud on every level. And it goes right from you playing up to when you become the admin of the game and have to manage its resources, the internal economies, every element of the game. Okay. Oh, and there's secret societies.
Yes, Chris briefly touched upon, it's also possible for players to create their own guilds and societies where they can hang out with their friends and have a common way of communicating and so forth. And there's a whole bunch of small interest groups within the game itself that are run like these secret societies. For example, somebody is interested in motorcycles, so he creates his own secret society and starts chatting with other people across the world about those motorcycles. It's fairly neat, actually. Now, a game of this size with players and developers and administrators from all across the world, it's quite tricky to try to somehow make it go in a specific direction. And actually, we've pretty much given up hope of trying to really efficiently manage this kind of chaos that we have online. So we accept that it's a state of controlled anarchy, where different players have different views about what they want to do on the game. We don't tell them that today you have to go out and kill that dragon. They can decide whatever they want to do on the game. But what we do instead is that we provide the tools to manage the communities. With tools, I mean both technical tools, meaning the ability to create these subgroups of interest, and also we try to provide the means, meaning that we as organizers arrange at times different kind of events that bring people together from across the world. Also, some players have decided to run these face-to-face conventions, and we're going to be seeing some disturbing pictures that have survived from these events later on. And finally, when a player gets bored or decides that, hey, this looks pretty neat, maybe I can develop it even further, I have a good idea about what Batmud lacks, we give them the option of becoming one of the developers. And that's pretty much actually how everybody of our currently active administrators have gotten started as well. For example, me, I've started Batmud in, was it 1990? I hung around the game for 5 or 6 years and decided that, hey, maybe I should be developing it instead. So I applied for what we call immortality, which means that I got coding rights on the game. I was suddenly able to write a whole bunch of code and write new environments and systems to it. And eventually, after some years, I moved on to become one of the admins of the game.
MUD conventions. This is something that surprises me because when I first was playing online, non-online people had the perception that we were freaks hiding in our basement, and the reason we were online was that we couldn't interact socially. But the one thing I found right away was that as soon as people started making connections online, they couldn't wait to meet in person. People would find out where each other was from. It was like, hey, let's meet in New York. Let's do this. We got to go see this movie together. And in Batmud, we have no shortage of that. We're here to represent Frog. All these guys play Batmud with us, and we'll perhaps expand this role. One of our big things here in America is a bunch of us go camping out in western Indiana in a godforsaken little dirt scrabble nowhere. But the beauty of it is that there's nowhere to go, nothing else to do but be there with each other. So people who've been playing this game forever, they say, I'm glad I finally got to meet you. Batmud supports this. They, in Finland, have had many what they call boat cons. There's a ferry that runs between Helsinki and Sweden, and the Finns would get on the boat on their side and then party their way over to Sweden. The Swedes would get on, party their way back, and it was just a couple days of raucous revelry and interaction. And they've done at least 8 of those. There's cons where they'll gather in the remote villages of Finland or even other parts of Europe. And some of them are small, and some have gone up to 150 attendees. Oh, Vegas Con. Well, I can't tell you about that because that stays in Vegas. And one of the things that Batmud does to support this may seem very minor, but part of the Bat page is focused on the community building, the conventions, and they promote the attendance and maintain an extensive gallery of photos. And what's that?
Evidence.
Yes, evidence. But one of the things is I always hear from people say, hey, I saw your picture on there, and there's you and your son, and I never imagined that. And just one of the ways that strengthens for those who can't get, like I've never seen you guys, I've seen you in person, but I couldn't wait to get here and say, hey, these are the guys that I've been hanging out with doing this for all these years. So for the fact that people assume we were just getting online to get away from them, it draws us right back into a circle where we would go out to Indiana, do the camping, and it would take me 11 hours to drive back, and I see that some people had been online 10 hours. They had gotten home, and within an hour they were online and telling everybody about the convention.
Speaking of CampCon, the upper 2 pictures are photos taken at various CampCon events.
Women.
Yeah, I've tried to handpick the pictures that actually feature women, trying to trick you into believing that we actually have girls playing this game. seriously, we do have some women playing the game, and it's been pretty neat to also see more than just friendship forming between our players, sometimes even across the countries. And I doubt that would have been possible without the means of Batmud combining people. So the first two pictures are from Camp Cons. As you can see, there's actually tents there, so geeks who are used to sitting in dark basements working on their computers actually have to dig out a tent somewhere and set it up and try to live in the wilderness. I don't think there's any bears or dangerous creatures around, but it's an interesting experience. I was there last year. And the bottom picture is from Vegas. More girls. Now, these photos are from Finland, Finnish conventions. The first one is from a big Finnish geek convention called Assembly. Batmud was one of the principal sponsors of that convention last year, so we were there with a fairly large crowd. And the second picture is actually our developers. We arranged one of these like large sailing boats for our disposal for a day, and went out sailing with the developers and had some nice dinner and so forth, and planned the future of the game. All right. Now, many people may think that MUDs are pretty outdated. It's just text-based games nowadays, and well, at the same time, the market is being flooded with these really fancy 3D games, World of Warcraft and EverQuest 2s and you name it. And I'm not trying to diss any of these graphical, massive multi-user games. Heck, I play World of Warcraft myself. But you can't really like avoid doing some kind of comparison between these two. Now, the good thing about these massive games is that they have, for one, graphical appeal. They appeal to a really broad range of people that look for a game that is very easy to get into. Fancy graphics. They have very good client softwares that are easy to use even by people who aren't experienced in this kind of games. And the companies that run these games have an enormous amount of money for their disposal, so they're able to like do really efficient marketing and be present at all of the big conventions and so forth, just like trying to sell their game. And of course, they have hundreds of thousands, if not millions of players, which is a great benefit. However, they are not without flaws. When you have this development project of this size, as for example World of Warcraft, it has a whole lot of development overhead. Just developing a single new dungeon requires at least 5 different people. You need to have the game designer, you need to have the programmer, you need to have the graphic artist that design all the 3D sketches and so forth. Whereas on a MUD, it's enough that one fellow has a good idea, and we give him the right to implement it into the game. And that's all it takes. Also, MUDs have no graphics. They are text-based. What this means in practice is that we don't limit the player to see things the way that we want to see them. Every player is free to use his own imagination to vision that big fiery dragon.
But I will point out, people go friggin' crazy if you just flash an ASCII bunny on the screen.
Also, text allows us to have a more advanced communication system. If you looked at any of these like 3D big games, it's very hard to have 1,000 people talking to each other at the same time, because most of the screen is reserved only for these fancy graphic stuff, and you have like a really small box somewhere in the lower corner for the actual chatting. And this is not true with the MUDs. In MUDs, the communication aspect is one of the most important things in the whole game. What's more, MUDs tend to be free. That's true with Batmud as well. It doesn't cost you anything to start playing the game or even to play the game further. It's totally free of charge. We don't force you to buy any kind of software to play. We don't charge any kind of monthly subscription fees to play. Also, MUDs tend to be run on a single server, whereas these really large games, they are split into different shards or realms or whatever, which means that the players are constantly interacting with each other all the time, instead of being spread out over a multitude of servers. This, in turn, leads to a more tightly knit community.